Stories tonight. The country has just approved Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use in the Philippines. China's Sinovac has also just applied for emergency use approval. Both of their shots are expected to arrive by February. But with Pfizer's vaccines requiring super cold storage, the health department says they've already ordered ultra-low freezers. The Marikina City LGU is also ready to accept shots as it sets up its own storage facility. Contact tracing is underway for the close contacts of the Filipino male who tested positive for the British variant of COVID-19. The health department calls for calm. They say minimum health protocols should help combat its spread. Residents of Barangay Kamuning, where the Pinoy positive for the UK variant resides, is reporting incidents of discrimination in the workplace. The Quezon City LGU is not keen on imposing a lockdown. And Donald Trump becomes the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. The House of Representatives impeached him for inciting the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol a week ago. Let's start with American pharmaceutical Pfizer being the first to secure emergency use approval in the Philippines. That's expected to arrive as soon as February. Officials are eyeing at least 25 million doses from the company. China's Sinovac, which has gained a vote of confidence from the president, has also applied for EUA. JC Cosico with a big story.
The country's Food and Drug Administration has allowed emergency use of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. It was in December 23 last year when the U.S. pharmaceutical firm applied for emergency use authorization.
And that the benefit of using the vaccine outweighs the known and potential risks. The interim data from the ongoing phase 3 trial shows that the vaccine has an efficacy of 95% in the study population.
Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez said their shots may arrive by late February. They're also in talks to acquire as much as 25 to 40 million doses of Pfizer's vaccines. LGUs, on the other hand, may get Pfizer vaccines upon government's go signal.
As far as the FDA is concerned, if the NTF designates them and allows them to procure also from Pfizer, as long as they follow, as they follow all the rules of the National Vaccination Program.
But FDA Director General Eric Domingo clarified the vaccine is not allowed to be sold commercially, since a certificate of product registration has yet to be issued. He also confirmed that China's Sinovac applied for an EUA on Wednesday, but results of its late-stage trials are still pending.
Yung kanyang benefit and risk balance, nakaangkla yun sa evaluation ng phase 3, interim phase 3 results. So we're going to ask for that.
Galvez earlier said that Sinovac will be able to secure an EUA before the first 50,000 vaccine doses arrive on February 20. The government has already secured 25 million vaccine doses in total from the Chinese pharmaceutical.
Sinovac po ay darating din po ng February 20, 50,000 initially, and then dadagdagan po sila ng 950,000 sa susunod na buwan at 2 million sa susunod na mga buwan.
In a televised speech last night, President Rodrigo Duterte defended what appears to be government's preference for the Chinese-made vaccine. He takes full responsibility over the vaccine acquisition, despite efficacy concerns.
The vacuna that Secretary Galvez is buying is as good as any other vacuna na naimbento ng mga Amerikano o mga Europeans. Hindi nagkulang ang Chinese. Hindi sila nagkulang sa otak.
AstraZeneca's EUA application, meanwhile, remains pending with the FDA. Although the government and the private sector have already signed another tripartite deal with a British-Swedish drug maker to secure 17 million doses of the vaccine. Around 300 companies and 39 LGUs took part in this endeavor. An initial deal was already signed back in November for 2.6 million doses worth 600 million pesos. Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion says vaccination may begin at June or July, benefiting at least 8.5 million Filipinos. For News 5, JC Cosico, VR1 News.
When Pfizer's vaccines arrive and become available, the next question will be, do we have the facilities for its distribution? For starters, Pfizer shots require a storage temperature of -60 to -80 degrees Celsius. In order to meet that, Pfizer has designed a special temperature-controlled thermal shipper that makes use of dry ice. It will maintain the recommended temperature for up to 10 days as long as it is unopened. Pfizer will also utilize GPS-enabled thermal sensors. The control tower will track its location and temperature of each shipment 24/7. That should prevent any deviations. Recipients have 3 storage options after receiving the shots. First, commercially available ultra-low temperature freezer. It can extend the shot's shelf life for up to 6 months. Second, for temporary storage, Pfizer's own thermal shippers can be used. These have to then be refilled with dry ice every 5 days for up to 30 days. And third, refrigeration units in hospitals can be of use as shots may be stored for 5 days at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius only. After 30 days of storage in Pfizer's thermal shipper, vaccination centers may transfer the vials under 2 to 8 degrees Celsius for 5 more days. But once thawed, Pfizer's vaccines can no longer be refrozen or stored under frozen conditions. Some LGUs like Marikina are making strides in preparing for the arrival of vaccines in the country. But how are things shaping up on the national scale? Let's find out in this report by Laila Pangilinan.
With COVID-19 vaccines expected to arrive next month, the Marikina City LGU is already preparing its own cold chain facility. So far, the cold storage room can stock an initial 100,000 vials. Another storage room is being prepared, as well as additional orders for vaccination fridges, freezers, and even ultra-low temperature freezers for Pfizer and Moderna shots. Marikina Mayor Marcy Chodoro says each fridge at present can store 7,500 vials or 3,750 liters per unit.
Ang target population sana natin na gustong i-vaccinate, na mangangailangan tayo ng 2 dose ng vaccine, kaya 240,000 dose o vials ang kailangan natin. Kaya i-compute natin ito at magkakaroon tayo ng kaukulang expansion para dito. Pero sa ngayon, kaya natin mag-hold ng mga 100,000 vials.
The vaccination fridges and freezers can be found inside the cold chain room of the City Health Office of Marikina. And just to give you a peek on what's inside, let's open this one up. This blue thing over here is what they call the vaccination fridge. It should be at +2 to +8 degrees centigrade. Each vaccination fridge can carry up to 7,500 vials. Once the COVID-19 vaccines are about to roll, it will be placed in this vaccination carrier, of course, with another temperature monitor to make sure that the right temperature is in place. Generators are also on standby in the event of a power outage. Nurses and doctors for the mass vaccination in Marikina are already being trained. Simulation exercises will also take place in mass vaccination areas.
Pag na-dilute mo yung vaccine, meron ka lang 6-hour window para i-administer. Otherwise, mawawala ng visa yung vaccine. From the bayan, merong ihahalo para intravenously pagpasok ay mas mabilis matanggap ng system ng body.
In the president's late-night briefing, vaccine czar Carlito Galvez said pharmaceutical companies are ready to lend their storage facilities. The private sector also volunteered to assist in supply chain management.
Nahanyan po yung company ng MVP, yung mga hospital ng MVP, yung sila Ayala po, binibigyan po tayo ng mga magagaling na supply chain manager. Yung grupo po ng Aboitiz, binibigyan din po tayo, yung Unilab.
The health department has also ordered ultra-low freezers that have a temperature control of -80 degrees centigrade.
Tinututukan natin na medyo nagkukulang ito pong -70 to -80 degrees centigrade. Napakamalamig po. Ito po ay ultra-low freezers kung tawagin po. Pero nakapag-identify na po kami dahil meron po tayong 10 na inangkat. We imported 10 ultra-low freezers.
Galvez said Manila, Cebu, and Davao all have capabilities to store hundreds of thousands or even up to 1 million vaccine vials. Authorities are working on a synchronization matrix to prepare for the rollout of Pfizer vaccines, which will come in tranches. For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, We Are One News.
We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, the Quezon City LGU is confident that a lockdown will not be necessary even after one of its residents in Kamuning tested positive for the British variant of COVID-19. That resident did not set foot in Quezon City, but he traveled to the country with more than 100 co-passengers. A look at how contact tracing efforts are going after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Health authorities are monitoring the close contacts of the first case of the UK variant here in the Philippines. Despite the presence of the more contagious variant, they are telling the public there's no need to panic. Greg Gregorio with the details.
The more infectious COVID-19 UK variant has now arrived in the Philippines. The patient is a 29-year-old male residing in Quezon City who traveled to the United Arab Emirates with his girlfriend last December 27 via Emirates flight EK335. Records show that both of them tested negative in RT-PCR tests before and after arriving in Dubai pursuant to their protocols. They are both real estate agents who went to Dubai for a business meeting last December 30. Apart from this, they also visited some tourist spots during their stay. They flew back to the Philippines last January 7. Upon their arrival, they underwent RT-PCR testing again and were placed under quarantine while waiting for the results. On the following day, the male patient tested positive for COVID-19.
Undergoing siya ngayon ng treatment for the pneumonia.
After the Philippine Genome Center confirmed that he also tested positive for the UK variant, authorities immediately conducted intensified contact tracing.
So naka-isolate na po ngayon yung mga birth na sumundo sa kanya, yung nag-asikaso sa kanya dun sa barangay quarantine facility.
The health department said it is still unsure if he caught the virus in Dubai.
Marami pong factors that we need to consider, like the number of days from the time that they left the Philippines until they reached Dubai. Ano ba yung mga naging activities in Dubai?
While the patient's partner tested negative for COVID-19, she is also under isolation in a quarantine facility. His parents, who were his close contacts, were also brought to a facility and will undergo swab testing. Based on the flight manifest of the EK332, his flight going back to the Philippines, 159 co-passengers of the patient were already identified. 58% or 92 passengers were already contacted, but only 52 responded. Concerned regional and city epidemiology and surveillance units have been tapped to contact other passengers of the Emirates flight. DOH is also working with the Interior Department for bolstered contact tracing of up to third-degree close contacts. Despite the presence of a more contagious COVID-19 variant, health experts assured the public that minimum health standards are effective in preventing the transmission of the virus. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Quezon City says there is no reason to impose a lockdown despite the UK variant-infected patient who hails from Kamuning. But what are the LGU's plans moving forward? Marian Enriquez tells us.
Quezon City resident Ana Luna works in a supermarket daily. Upon learning that a Kamuning resident tested positive for the UK variant of COVID-19, she could not help but worry.
Medyo natatakot din. Kasi malay mo, di natin alam, baka nandyan lang din sa tabi-tabi yung virus na yan.
These tricycle drivers brush off threats of the new variant. They can't afford to be scared as they have to earn a living. To them, it all boils down to observing minimum health protocols.
Ubus na yung takot. Palaging COVID, pagka hindi ka naman namasada, magugutom ka. Nakakatakot po talaga yung bagong pandemic, pero sa ngayon po talaga normal na eh. Kailangan na lang natin talaga mag-ingat.
But what has gotten the Quezon City LGU alarmed are reports of Kamuning residents being asked by employers not to report for work. Mayor Joy Belmonte says such discriminatory acts come with penalties.
After we have already informed the public, made them aware of the true situation, and yet patuloy pa rin nilang dinidiscriminate ang mga mamamayan ng Kamuning na walang batayan.
The LGU does not see any need to impose a lockdown, especially since the case in question did not have any close contact in the community. Mayor Joy Belmonte says the patient was immediately brought to an isolation facility upon arrival to the country.
Since the index case did not set foot in the barangay, at it is very unlikely that nakahawa siya sa kanyang mga kapitbahay, etc.
But if it needs be, QC may implement so-called granular lockdowns on areas with community transmission.
Kamuning is in fact one of the barangays in our city with the lowest number of COVID-positive cases. And we have not observed any clustering yet there or any community transmission.
The patient and his close contacts, plus the health workers who assisted him, are all under isolation. The Quezon City LGU also said that they have received the flight manifest, which showed 10 QC residents were on the same flight as the infected patient. Returning QC residents must now undergo a full 14-day quarantine.
Minsan, after makuha na nila yung result, nag-negative na, pinapauwi na sa bahay. Ngayon, hindi po ina-allow na natin yung ganon.
Belmonte says the city is ready should there be a surge in cases. They have 2,000 quarantine beds, while their facilities conduct 2,500 tests a day. Their hospital occupancy is currently at 30%. The QC-LGU also urged residents who went to Traslacion in Quiapo last January 9 to undergo swab testing. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
NCR police are denying allegations of torture and coercion by the respondents in the death of flight attendant Christine Dacera. NCRPO Chief Vicente Danao says they were treated properly. He says no police officer had been present when the respondents spoke with media. Danao says the respondents could be charged for perjury for having retracted their statements. The respondents claimed Makati police forced them to lie that someone allegedly spiked Christine's drink. Meanwhile, the Tourism Department is revoking the operation certificate of City Garden Grand Hotel in Makati City, where Dacera was found lifeless on New Year's Day. The DOT said the hotel is liable for gross and evident bad faith when it accepted guests for leisure. The DOT NCR also considered other evidence pointing to the Makati Hotel's marketing packages for leisure guests. The accreditation of the hotel, a quarantine facility, has also been suspended for 6 months with a fine of 10,000 pesos for quarantine violations. We'll take another break. When the big story returns. With less than a week left before his term ends, Donald Trump becomes the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. And as lawmakers introduce a new block named after Korean sensation BTS, one of the country's rail lines rides the bandwagon. Find out their gimmick later. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Senators and political experts are slamming the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments for having declared that it has already convened into a constituent assembly, saying the move goes against the Constitution. Leandros Baños explains.
What's the rush? This was Senate President Tito Sotto's question to House panel on Constitutional Amendments Chairperson Alfredo Garbin. In a hearing, Garbin claimed the committee already sits as a constituent assembly.
So once we propose and start initiating proposed amendment to the Constitution, we are exercising our constituent power.
How can this be? Asks Soto when Congress is on break. Citing Article 17 of the Constitution, Senator Panfilo Lacson says convening as a CONAS requires the entire Congress, but Garbin won't budge.
Yung konsepto nila ng Constituent Assembly, we will come together and convene as a Constituent Assembly. Ipaulit-ulit ko ang sinasabi ng ating Constitution does not provide Article 17, Section 1. If you can find that there is a provision which mandate convening of a constituent assembly, lilibre ko kayo lahat. Hong Kong, I'm certain about that.
But a constitutionalist disagrees. Attorney Michael Henry Yusinko, a senior research fellow at the Ateneo School of Government, says both chambers first have to tackle and vote on a joint resolution calling for a CONAS.
By very definition of the word constituent assembly, it is comprised of both chambers of Congress. He is mistaken to say that they are already doing the work of a constituent assembly, because that goes against the very definition or the very identity of what a constituent assembly is.
Yusinko cited the three ways by which the Constitution can be amended. One is through a constitutional convention with elected delegates. Another is via a people's initiative. And lastly, through a constituent assembly convened by both chambers.
May be proposed by the Congress, okay, upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members or a constitutional convention. Yung first option is yung tinatawag nating constituent assembly. Okay? So that is Congress. It is not the House of Reps, it is not the Senate, it is the Congress. That's why I'm saying what they're doing now is really preparatory work.
But should the 3/4 votes be done separately by the two houses, some senators want to vote separately, as their 24 votes might seem insignificant compared to almost 300 House representatives. Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon says House lawmakers are trying to hijack the powers of a constituent assembly. One of the supporters of the lower house's economic amendments, former Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Ernesto Pernia, tells the chiefs that he will withdraw his support should revisions go beyond economic provisions.
I agree but there has to be an airtight proviso that there will be no straying into political provisions.
House leaders in a manifesto assured that they will only touch economic provisions in the Constitution. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Now time for the big stories in sports. A look at the game with Paolo Del Rosario.
Thanks, Robbie. In NBA news, reports say former MVP James Harden is headed to the Brooklyn Nets to reunite with Kevin Durant. In a 4-team trade with the Pacers, Rockets, and Cavs, as well as the Nets, they will receive Harden while the Pacers will obtain Caris LeVert and a second-round pick. The Cavs get promising center Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince, while the Rockets get Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, Rodions Kurucs, 4 first-rounders, and 4 Brooklyn first-round swaps. Catch the NBA regular season action on NBA TV Philippines. That's it for the latest in the world of sports. Catch us again later at 9:30 p.m. on One News and One Sports Plus. My name is Paolo De Rosario, and this has been The Game.
Thanks, Paolo. Now, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Sure enough, this is what the Democrat-led U.S. House of Representatives did as it voted to impeach outgoing President Donald Trump for a second time. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the enforcement of the article of impeachment against Trump for incitement of insurrection. 10 Republicans also supported the move that brought the final vote to 232 to 197 in favor of Trump's impeachment. Eyes are now on Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who will decide when to hold the Senate trial that will determine the president's fate. Trump is set to leave office on the 20th. Lawmakers are not the only ones who caught the BTS bug. The MRT3 management is joining the K-pop fever. The MRT3's new contact tracing app, MRT Trace, has been branded as BTS or Bagong Tracing System. They even came up with a caricature which resembles a member of the K-pop group. It was captioned Borahae, a slang word combining Korean words for purple, the signature color of BTS, and I love you. The soft launch of MRT Trace is set for January 18. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, you can visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.